You're very welcome back to the show. Delighted to say joining us on the line, as it is a Thursday evening, I'm delighted to say John Giles is with us once again. John, very welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Richie.
I know you had an eye on this morning's proceedings in Sydney with the Republic of Ireland women's team starting off their World Cup campaign with that narrow 1-0 loss to Australia. We covered it in depth there just a moment ago, John, but I know you had an eye on it as well. What did you make of Ireland's performance this morning?
I thought it was very good. Well coached team, no doubt about that. They didn't create many chances, but neither did Australia. And as we know, it was clinched by a penalty kick, and I think it was Catley scored it, and it was a free kick by Shiva on Rasso. Was that his name?
Rasso, yeah, it was her name. Yeah. Rasso,
because now Rasso was kicking lumps out of everybody. It could have been booked or sent off during the game, and so maybe our girl thought she'd have a go at him at that particular time. But it was definite penalty, and that it separated the teams overall. But I thought it was a good performance by the Irish team. They weren't fancied, I don't think, before the match, but I thought were very well coached and played well, and they were beaten by a penalty kick.
Considering that the theory was that they would be outclassed and maybe overawed by the occasion as well, to come away with a draw perhaps being the result that would have seemed fairest coming out of it, I think speaks volumes of the performance as well this morning. But on we go towards Canada and then that concluding game in the group against Nigeria.
Sorry, Richie, that wasn't the case. When they weren't outplayed,
of course,
by any means. I mean, it was a penalty kick in the game, and it, obviously that changed the game a lot from Australia's point of view, because the Irish team had to try and come back from that. But I thought the performance was good. They had good morale. They played well. And I think it was a very, very difficult game for Australia, and maybe a little bit lucky to get away with it.
Yeah, plenty to take from it, I'm sure. We're also madly now into this weird period where there's European games ongoing involving the Irish sides. There's pre-season friendlies ongoing now as well with sides across Europe as well, not least of which in the Premier League, and we're getting to see the first tasters of new signings that many big Premier League teams have made over the last week or so, and none more so, it seems, than Declan Rice at Arsenal. Arsenal finally getting that deal over the line at the weekend, John. North of £100 million in total, this deal for Rice. Arsenal have paid West Ham. He's going to be playing his first friendly matches now over the next while as well. Considering they've brought him in with Granit Xhaka heading to Bayer Leverkusen, seems like a definite upgrade in the centre of the park for Mikel Arteta for next season. Oh,
it was huge. I'm surprised City didn't go as big as Arsenal in that particular move. They've lost Gundogan. There may be one or two midfield players gone, and Declan Rice would have been a great signing for them, as he is for Arsenal. And good luck to Arsenal. I think what's happened there is that with Arteta doing the job that he's doing, I think he's got the confidence now of the owners in the club, and they're ready to back him, whereas they hadn't done it before. So they have Havertz as well, haven't they? Rice is a huge signing, Richie, to be honest. Now what's happened there is he's actually replacing Xhaka. Xhaka's gone. And they're chalk and cheese, those players. I mean, Rice is a real McCoy. I mean, I never fancied Xhaka. I think it's a good move getting him out of the place. So it's a biggie for Arsenal to get Rice, and a disappointing I'd say for Guardiola, because he's letting some players go. Gundogan has gone, Mahrez might go, so they've been big players for him. Mahrez hasn't gone yet, but
looks like he's on his way.
Is he gone?
I think there's been a bid accepted. I think Al Ahly in Saudi Arabia bid €35 million for him. So as far as I can make out, that's going to be done in the coming days. Yeah, well, that's another good player gone from him. Now he might get the young players to him. I know he signed Kovacic, haven't they, from Chelsea? He's a good player, but I wouldn't have put him up in the bracket of the players that have left. Kalvin Phillips, is he going to do it? I think Foden will do it and come into the game as a really good player. But I think Rice is a big loss to Manchester City and a big gain
gain for West Ham.
What kind of qualities do you see Rice bringing to that Arsenal midfield, John, apart from less of a propensity to get sent off that Granit Xhaka might have had?
Well, Xhaka is. I think there's definitely no doubt who is the better player there in a big way. I think he's a good all-round player, Rice. He's not the old-fashioned schemer, doesn't get on the ball in that way, but he covers the ground brilliantly and is always in a good defensive position. Then doesn't give the ball away very much, but he's not a player that's going to distribute the ball all over the place. But he's a good all-round player that would be good in a defensive way and an attacking way. He's just one of those players. He's a very fit lad, covers the ground well. Doesn't get as many goals from midfield as he might get, Richie. And he's not like a schemer that gets on the ball and creates loads of chances, but he gets on the ball a lot, and he doesn't give it away. And he defends well, gets back well defensively. So he's covering the ground all the time and covers it very, very well. He's a really, really good all-round player. I think he's a big loss for Pep not to get him during the close season.
I think from Guardiola's point of view, he probably would have been looking at that midfield situation. I know they've lost Gundogan and they're probably going to lose Mahrez, but Mahrez would he'd be considered more of a wide player. That they have Kalvin Phillips there, who never really got utilised properly last season, be it because of fitness or tactical concerns. But the theory would be that this season will be the season that Kalvin Phillips steps into that role and kind of cements his place in the Manchester City midfield. You would have seen a lot of him at Leeds. Do you feel he's able to kind of step into that role?
I'm disappointed he didn't. The reason he didn't play many matches is because when he played, he didn't play very well. Yeah. It does take some players a while to settle down into the club, but I would have expected more from him, from the way he played at Leeds, where he was a good winner of the ball. He got around the pitch, and he didn't show any of that really. And Foden is very good. I think Foden will be a top class player. Now, there have been players in the past who haven't done well in their first season and then pick it up. He could be one of those players because he hasn't played anywhere near as well as he has played at Leeds.
On does the Phillips situation at Manchester City, I know they're two different players, two different clubs, so maybe I'm wrong to conflate them here, but when you see how Phillips perhaps struggles to settle into his Manchester City surrounds last season, would you have a similar concern for someone like Declan Rice, who has come from a team who, one or two seasons aside, have been occupying the second half, or the bottom half, of the Premier League table? He's asked to play a very defensive job, or has been for West Ham over the past couple of seasons. Would you worry that he might struggle to transition into a team that are notionally better and looking more forward up the table?
No, I'd be very surprised if he didn't make a better player of himself and a better player of Arsenal.
Okay.
I don't think Phillips ever showed as much at Leeds as Rice has at West Ham. Right. To be honest. I think Phillips had a certain job to do, pretty much defensively, but he wasn't as good. I don't think he was anywhere near as good at Leeds as Rice was at West Ham. Yeah. I think Rice will just step into it there. And he said, I think after the World Cup or something, I think when he came back to Leeds, Phillips, I remember Pep getting on to say that he was overweight, that he put on some weight during the thing. That's not a good sign. You know what I mean, Richie? Yeah. You should never let yourself go unfit in any way whatsoever. Now, he mightn't have played much in the World Cup and that, but he'd be training and doing it. And I was disappointed when I saw that, because Guardiola made it public that he felt that he went, and he was very disappointed in him. Yeah. So, it wasn't a good sign, that's for sure.
From a City point of view, they have been relatively quiet so far in the transfer market. As you mentioned there, Mateo Kovacic has come in from Chelsea. Other than that, they've been loan signings coming back in. They've let Gundogan go to Barcelona. There's perhaps talk that Kyle Walker could go to Bayern Munich, which would be something of a move as well. And then, as we mentioned, Riyad Mahrez could be following the golden path off to Saudi Arabia. It still feels like they have work to do in the transfer market, because the last thing you want to do when you're a manager building on a title-winning team is to stand still.
Oh, definitely. You can't afford to stand still at any time, Richie, as we know. I think Foden will come into the game a lot more. I think he'll be a top-class player.
Do you see him operating deeper, like as one of those midfield three, as opposed to being one of the players who'd operate? Like Jack Grealish's arrival, and certainly his cementing of his place in the team last season, seemed to push Foden to the periphery. But do you see Foden operating as a deeper-lying player and being able to get the most out of him there?
It could well be. I haven't seen him in that position, Richie. We don't see him there. It's very difficult to know. But I think he's a good all-round player. You know, he's played on both wings and that. And I think he's the real deal. Now, whether he can play in that position, I'd be surprised if he couldn't. But he's a bit young to be taking on the responsibility of that particular situation. You know, Gundogan is a very experienced player, and one or two, Silva is a very experienced player, Mara is a very experienced player. I'd have great confidence in Foden becoming a top-class player. If he's asked to do that job, I think he would do a very, very good job in there. But he's age-wise, he's a bit young for that particular position.
In the midfield, why would age make much of a difference to how he performs in there, John?
Because you're expected to do an awful lot of stuff in that position, Richie. You know, when you're in that position, you're expected to connect the back to the front, and that means good positional sense, experience, to be able to do it. I can only go, and I'd only be talking about myself, but I was played in that position, and when I was at Manchester United. This was in 1961. I played in the semi-final of the Cup against Spurs, against Dave Mackay and Danny Blanchflower, White. They were terrific players. And I played very, very badly, Richie. Yeah. And I wasn't able to do the job that I thought I was capable of doing. So when I went to Leeds, I went as a right winger to Leeds. I was only 22, and I played with Bobby Collins for 2 or 3 years, and Bobby Collins got injured, and I took over from him. And I was 25 at that stage. Now I was able to do it. I wasn't able to do it when I was 21.
Yeah,
I thought I was, but it's a very, very responsible position to be in, because you're the main man in many ways of connecting the back to the front, and it's about positional sense, having and when you're goal down, all the things you need to be a really top class player to be able to do that. Now, whether Foden is going to get into that position, he's still a young guy. Is he able to do it? Does Pep think he's able to do that? Maybe so. I think when he's played on the wing and played generally, I think he's been a top class and will be a top class player.
Yeah.
Is he too young to do it now? I don't know. Or is he going to be asked to do it?
He's got that sense, I guess, that he's been in and around the team for enough years now, in terms of not necessarily a senior role, but he's been one of those 11 to 14 players that Guardiola would call upon with fair regularity, that you'd figure he'd have enough experience under his belt now to be able to operate in there, that even at 23 he's a player of decent experience.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, Richie, but you haven't seen him play in that particular position.
Yeah. He's
played mostly as a winger, or a midfield player, but he has been put in the position where he's the man to do the job. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He might well be. He might well. I've never seen him in that position. De Bruyne doesn't do it either. Now, he plays on right hand side of the pitch, and he's a very, very, very good player. But they haven't had anybody in the middle of the pitch that's really done the job in a way that it actually controls the game. I think he has a lot of ability. He might well be able to do that. De Bruyne doesn't do that. He plays on the right-hand side, and he's very, very good, and he distributes the ball very, very well. But playing in the middle of the field, dictating the game is another game again.
Yeah.
But he's a very, very talented lad. Foden is a very, very talented lad, and I wouldn't be surprised if he is able to do it, Richie.
Listen, at the end of the day, I don't think any of us should have any real concerns over Manchester City. I think given the depth of their resources and the players that they already have at their disposal, I think they're going to be okay next season. One of the interesting cases...
Well, the thing is with them, okay is not good enough for City.
Yeah.
I mean, if you say good, and I know you're not saying that, but Gundogan is gone. Bernardo Silva, who's a top player, like there's 3-player Mahrez, are really, really top-class players, could well be gone for that. Now, what's the other young man that plays outside left? A young fella, I can't think of his name, Richie.
Oh, you've got me there. In terms of the Grealish, Jack Grealish?
Not Grealish. No, he's a young fella, blonde-haired lad. But anyway, I should know his name. But he's a really top-class player. He could play on the left wing, I think, straight away, and release Foden to play in the middle of the field if that's what they want to do. But I mean, he's bought, what's the lad's name? Kovacic
from Chelsea. Yeah.
You know, he's an experienced, he's a good player, but I don't think he has I don't think he's a calibre of the lads that could be moving.
Yeah.
Now, whether he has something there that we don't know about, I'm surprised. I'd be very surprised as a top class manager that he would leave himself short of important positions in the team. Richie.
Yeah.
But when you look at it, if Gundogan is gone, if Mahrez is gone, if Bernard Silva is gone, that's 3. They're really, really top class players. To be able to replace them without getting Rice is going to be a big job for Guardiola.
This is like a wider point, John, and I'm be leaning on your experience as a manager as well. When, are you at a disadvantage when you bring players in late in the window in terms of your pre-season training and all that, because there are teams that have gotten business done fairly quickly and rapidly, and they've shifted players out the door that they don't want anymore, and they've gotten the players that they want absolutely as their priority and pretty quickly. Manchester City will be heading into the second month of pre-season when their major rivals will be coming. So Gvardiol, the Croatian defender, will be coming in from Leipzig, it seems, and maybe 1 or 2 others. But you kind of want to get this business done earlier in the window, I'm thinking, rather than later.
Oh, as soon as you can, Richard, there's no doubt about that. I think he might have been very confident of getting Declan Rice. Yeah. I'd say so anyway. I think that would be a blow to him, and that would be the main signing of the season. And he hasn't got, at the moment, a main player of the season, for this season coming up. I think he is a bit short. I think he definitely is a bit short. If those, Bernardo Silva hasn't gone yet. Mahrez hasn't gone yet. But what we heard in the paper is that they're likely to go, but they haven't gone yet. So he could easily change his mind on those 2 players.
Sure, he could.
But, and they're top class players as we've seen. If we've got Rice, then you'd say, well, fair enough, the others can go, or 1 or 2 of the others can go, but he hasn't done that, and I'd be amazed if he leaves himself short. Yeah,
I have a feeling he won't. I'm one of the major transfer sagas of the summer so far, John, and there's always at least one, but this one seems to be revolving around him for the second year running, would be around Harry Kane. There's talk that Bayern Munich are still hovering. They've had a couple of bids apparently rejected by Tottenham for the striker. He's now going to be entering into the final year of his contract. Would it be within Kane's interests to push through a move this summer, or do you feel he's going to hang on and get a big pocket full of change next year by going as a free transfer?
Well, that's a very good question, Richie. It depends what his attitude is to play in a team that's going to win a trophy. I mean, I don't think Spurs will win a trophy this year. I think they've signed Maddison and Harry is there. You'd want to be inside Harry's head to know. I mean, if he's looking at to securing his future financially, I mean, and I'm sure he has people that give him advice. What he would do is see out his contract.
Right.
I mean, Spurs at the moment are looking for 100 million for him. Right. Now, if he's getting on 30, I think he's around 30 now. I think somebody would advise him, no, play for Spurs for a year. If they're looking for 100 grand for you now, you'll be worth at least 50 million next year.
Yeah.
And he's a free agent. So some players, and I can understand it at his age now, you have to look at the financials future as well as wanting to win trophies. Like, and I'd ask anybody that listens to us now, if you were in the position he's in, what would you do? Would you say, no, I'm going to see out my contract, and they're looking for 100 million for me this year. If I'm a free agent next year, if I say to any club coming in, I'll go for 50 million, and I can keep the 50 million? Or do you say, no, I'll sign for Spurs again, and lose out on the 50 million?
Yeah. His people seem to be putting it out there that he will be open to a move this summer. At least if you believe what we're reading, is that his family, who I think act essentially as his agents, have been the ones speaking to Bayern, and they've been the one putting it to Bayern Munich that, listen, he will be open to going this summer. If you can cut a deal with Daniel Levy, maybe you could get him this year.
Yeah, but what would he get? What deal would he cut with Daniel Levy?
Well, Bayern Munich would be the ones that have to cut the deal with Daniel Levy to try and get him extricated from that contract. And as you mentioned there, even though he does have a year left in it, it would take north of £90 million to get him out of there. Which, I don't know. Yep. It's a no-win situation for Kane, because you're at that age, as you mentioned.
I think it's a big win situation.
Do you think? Well, like, he's going to listen. Harry Kane's not going to be a poor man. He's not going to be on the breadline either side of this move, whether it's this summer or next.
But Richie, if you try, I'm trying to put myself into his head.
Yeah.
Right, he's 30 now, right, and Spurs are looking for 100 million, right. They're not going to give Harry 50 half of that. That's not going to happen, right. So that's why the players are in the positions they're in now compared to years ago. You know, he can say, no, I'll play for Spurs, I'll do my best for Spurs for this year, but I'll be a free agent next year.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to say to you, or to myself, and that, what would you do in that position? If you can say, right, I'll definitely play for Spurs, I'll do my best, but next season I can sell myself for at least 50 million.
Or the other side of that is he could be going playing Champions League football next season and winning a Bundesliga title and be the man, because they've been crying out for a number 9 in Munich since Lewandowski went to Barcelona. Like, they need a centre forward. It's a big choice. Yeah. Like, it's a big choice for him to make.
Oh, it's a huge choice. Yeah. It's a huge choice, Richie. I mean, I could say to you, and I could say to a lot of listeners, which would you do? You know.
I think our listeners and myself, John, would be happy with whatever a Premier League or a Bundesliga club is going to be giving us at this stage. Speaking of securing your futures, we mentioned Mahrez being one of those players who are potentially off to Saudi Arabia. It would seem that heading out of Liverpool are Jordan Henderson, and Fabinho has attracted interest from over there as well. Jordan Henderson's now 33 years of age. He's served Liverpool really well. He's won everything that's possible to win there, more or less, in his time since moving from Sunderland over a decade ago. It seems like Liverpool are going to make out like bandits here if they're getting anything for a player who is maybe not going to play 20 games in the Premier League next season for them. Well,
it's a blessing for Liverpool, because Henderson doesn't have the choice that Kane could possibly have next season, because he's 2 years left on his contract. Apparently, that's what I read in the paper. Yeah. Right. So Liverpool are the club now are in the strong position, because I see 20 million mentioned, and that'd be a big deal for Liverpool, because he's 33 now. Yeah. You know, Henderson wouldn't be in the same position as Harry Kane. He'd be in a good position, because I'm sure he got a big offer to go to Saudi Arabia. But it's changed a lot in many ways for the players, and good luck to them, Richie. Like in my day, you didn't have those choices. You know, if you signed a contract, you signed for life, and that was the end of it. Yeah. You know, it's brilliant now for the players in the positions that they're in. You know, you've got the Saudi Arabia offering big money. Liverpool will probably take it, but there's more choices now. Because what happened in my day, when you signed, or when I was a young fella, you signed at 17, you signed for life. you couldn't go anywhere, and you were on a maximum wage.
Yeah.
And I think the positions the players are in now, like if you take Henderson's position, he's 33. If he goes to Saudi Arabia, he's going to make an awful lot of money for 2 or 3 years, as most of the lads who are going there. They have that choice on it.
Making it tax-free as well, John.
Sorry?
They're making it tax-free as well.
Yeah, well, if you, again, I'd say to you, Richie, and your listeners, if you're in Harry Kane's position, right, and he's a free agent next year,
yeah,
and Spurs are looking for 100 million for him now. Now, if he's worth 100 million now, he's going to be worth at least 70 million next year.
Yeah.
That he can get for himself, right? If he goes the Spurs way, Spurs will get 100 million, and he's not entitled to any of that.
True. I wanted to touch on McAllister's arrival as well at Liverpool, John, because I know you're a fan, and it seems as if he's one of these players who, like, we don't know how these things will go, clearly, but he seems like somebody who has the ability to fit in seamlessly into that midfield and improve it, and I think that's obviously what Klopp has done with him in mind.
Oh, definitely. I think he's one of those lads. There's an innocence about him, Richie, when I see him play. He just does things in the way that they should be done and plays in the way that it should be played with the effort that's given. He's just like a very honest individual who does it naturally on the pitch the way he does it.
Yeah.
He doesn't see himself as a star. He doesn't see him. He just gets on with the job. And very seldom, in my opinion, I played with one lad like that, and that was a lad called Paul Madeley. You might have heard of Paul Madeley.
Absolutely.
He was brilliant, but he was one of the most modest people I ever met in my life. He never thought of himself as a star. He went out and played, and he loved playing. To give his best, play, enjoy it, and that was it.
Yeah.
And I think when I see this lad, that's what he looks like me. There's an innocence about him, which is brilliant. Because I played with some lads as well who would have been ahead of themselves, or big-headed, or wants to show off, and all the various things. Not many, but I played with a few. But watching this lad play, he just gets on with the job, which is brilliant. He's not shouting around. He's not throwing his arms around. He's just very, very good at what he does. And players like that are really, really brilliant for managers. You see, I would say there's no trouble with him at all. Just gets out, enjoys what he's doing, loves what he's doing, plays well, and is very, very talented lad.
Yeah.
And I can see him being a real, real asset to Liverpool or any other club that he was in.
Yeah.
And he would go to.
I want to touch on one final one, John, as well, because this broke, and I think we'd seen it coming from a couple of days out. Matt Doherty has gotten a move back to Wolves. He'd been in limbo, I guess, after being released by Atletico Madrid. His time at Tottenham came to a premature end back in January. Good to see a Republic of Ireland international back in the Premier League. We've got a few now. Yeah,
well, he's a very good player, as we know, but he's an attacking fullback, and he would have to suit the team that he was in, Richie, Like, he's a very, very good player. You might say, well, he's not a great fullback, but he's a very good player coming from that position, and he's a good footballer. And, Wolves they know what he can do. I think that's why he's gone back to them there. But, as you said, the moves before weren't successes for him. Yeah. But he's a very, very, very good footballer. And if he gets back into the Spurs team, the Wolves team, as you say, then it's very, very good for the Irish team.
Yeah, it can only be a benefit to have players playing regularly. Like, you look at the likes of Dara O'Shea and Chidozie Ogbene, they've gotten moves up to the Premier League this summer as well. So fingers crossed that has a knock-on effect heading into September.
We'll keep our fingers well crossed, Richie.
We'll get rickets from keeping them crossed, John, at this stage, to be honest. John Giles, thanks so much for taking time out to speak to us this evening.
Thanks, Richie.
Have a great week.
Speak to you then.
Bye-bye.
Bye.